for Trita, it's personal in a lot of ways. He was born in Iran, but moved with his family here at the young age of 4. Moved to Sweden in order to escape political repression in Iran. His dad was an outspoken academic who was jailed by the Shah and then by the Ayatollah. So consider his point of view ahead of this conversation. Trita, it's great to see you. Welcome back to Bloomberg.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm wondering your thoughts on the way the president is offering this sort of split screen message, which manifests itself on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes we are talking, sometimes we are shooting. What do we call this?
Well, it's starting to become a Swiss cheese of a ceasefire, and at some point it's going to fall apart if it continues this way. I frankly think that both sides have overreacted. I think it was obviously wrong of the Iranians to shoot at the ships. They're very worried that the U.S. was trying to set up a southern corridor that would be outside of Iran's control. So if the U.S. were to restart the war, which of course the Iranians are very suspicious that he might, the Iranians would no longer have the strait as a weapon and as a leverage. And given the fact that it was crucial for them, it's understandable that they're going to be protective of it. But shooting at the ships was an overreaction. And then, you know, the manner in which the United States responded here was also, in my view, unnecessary. Some response was warranted, but this went beyond that. And it's not that there is an impossibility to get back to talks. There already seems to be some significant efforts. It's that this memorandum period was supposed to be used to actually help build some confidence between the two sides so they could strike a final deal. But so far, it seems that this effort has been a confidence depleting effort rather than a confidence building period. And that's very problematic because ultimately that makes it more difficult to get a lasting deal at the end of this.
President called the regime scum this week, among other interesting names. Clearly, there's no trust on our side of things, and that's probably deserved. Do you believe or expect that Iran will trust Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff enough to make a deal?
No, I don't think either side is going to trust the other. And as you mentioned, the U.S. has now attacked Iran twice in the midst of negotiations, including killing their supreme leader. So trust is beyond what we can expect, but one can trust the incentive and interest of the other side to be a guide of how they will act. And if there's a deal that actually is good for both sides and it's better than the alternative, then you can trust that they will follow their own self-interest in a rational way and stick to it. That's the sweet spot that the two countries have to find.
Remember, help is on its way. President Trump posted that on Truth Social to the people of Iran long before the shooting started. That was before thousands were killed by the regime. And Trita, I wonder if you can tell us anything about the people we never hear about, those who actually live in Iran. We saw the video of people chanting death to America at the Ayatollah's funeral last weekend. But what is their feeling about the regime and this stalemate that we seem to be in?
I think, frankly, this war has galvanized the supporters of the regime within Iran significantly. In some ways, this war has actually saved the Islamic Republic because it was undoubtedly facing a significant legitimacy crisis back in December and January. But just as Saddam Hussein's invasion of Iran back in 1980 actually helped save the Islamic Republic, because back then they had not fully consolidated their power, but an external enemy enabled them to do so. I think the U.S. attack, completely contrary to what Trump thought, ended up doing pretty much the same. Do they have the majority support of the population? I do not believe so. I think their support levels prior to this war was probably no more than 15 to 20%. And after the war, it may have gone up. But more importantly, those 15 to 20% or 25% are now much more intense in their level of support for the regime. Because in their view,
do you believe?
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Finish your answer.
Yeah, because from their view, it performed. It protected the country against two countries that have nuclear weapons. And nationalism sentiments always tend to take over in moments like this. Whether they last or not is a different story.
I understand. Do you believe that a popular uprising is the only way to topple this regime with or without the help of the U.S.?
Well, I think external help is actually extremely unhelpful. I don't think help ever was on its way, regardless of what Trump was saying. This is something that only the Iranians can handle at the end of the day. Now, there was a lot of belief in that before. The belief in it completely dwindled in the last couple of years, and there was a sentiment, at least amongst the majority, that nothing could happen unless there was help from the outside. Well, now we saw
Yeah.
that. We saw the war. We saw what that did, and it certainly didn't help. It was counterproductive. So I do think that this system is going to change, but it's going to have to be because of change agents from inside, Iranians themselves doing it. It may take a very long time. It may not move in a straight direction. In fact, I think it's been moving backwards for at least the last 10 or so
Uh-huh.
years, but I don't see
Yeah.
any other pathway.
Well, so do Iranians, the people of Iran, believe that the U.S. abandoned them? Is this some sort of Middle Eastern Bay of Pigs?
Well, for those who actually believed that the US would come to their aid, yes, I think there is a
Mm-hmm.
sense of betrayal that they have. I don't think that was the majority. I think a majority had a variety of opinions, ranging from never believing the US, never believing that the US actually would act in the interests of the Iranian people, but it would act in its own interest. So having a more cynical view of countries, which I personally think is healthy because it's more accurate, to be frank. It's not just the US, it's all states. But also those who, because of looking at what happened in Libya, in Syria, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, believe that even if the intentions of the US were good, the capacity to actually follow through and make sure that it's a success was simply not there. We're very skeptical of this in the first place because the track record of the US in the region, particularly in terms of democratizing countries, is abysmal. So I think the majority fell in that camp, and a very small minority, out of desperation because of the repression of the government, were hoping that a war potentially could bring down the regime, and it did the opposite.
Really something. Uh, Trita, I've only got about a minute left. If the ceasefire is over, like the president says, we'll take him at his word. Are we starting from scratch?
If the ceasefire is truly over and the MOU is over, because the ceasefire can be over
Mm-hmm.
and the MOU is still standing, not only are we starting from scratch, we're starting from a worse situation. Because the
Jeez.
war, so if you take a look at oil inventories right now, or the strategic reserve, is much lower than it was in February. So the war would
Yeah.
restart at a much worse position economically. The runway the US would have would be much shorter, and we're also closer to the midterms. So it would be a much worse situation. And on top of that, any trust or confidence in going for a ceasefire would be far less than it was before. And it was very difficult in the first time.